Connecting Africa's resources through digital transformation and the need to push Made in Africa agenda through production and manufacturing of natural resources are part of the conversations at the World Economic Forum for Africa coming to a close today in Kigali, the Rwandan capital. Meanwhile, the coordinator of the Francophone Africa, Jean-Paul Thiel, joins us now to look at some of these issues via Skype. Good afternoon. Welcome to the program. Thank you very much, John. Give us a sense of this conversation regarding connecting Africa's resources through digital transformation, knowing fully well that the continent has diverse resources.
Well, so it's been a very good meeting here with the theme this year being how can digital transform the African economy. That being said, I think the bigger underlying theme of this year's meeting, as was the case in previous years, was really about how are we going to create enough jobs for the young Africans. Every year, 10 million young Africans are entering the job markets, or I should say, try to enter the job markets, and we are not nearly producing enough jobs for them. So the question is, how can digital help? I think that's what I heard in one of the sessions from Dr. Adesina, the chairman of the African Development Bank. He was asked the same question, and he made a very straightforward comment. And he said, look, you know, we in Africa were not even able to provide electricity to our people, so don't tell me about digital. So that is to say that the consensus here at the meeting has that digital is a tool. It will be extremely important in transforming certain sectors. It has started already to converge, for example, banking and mobile phone. You have Jumia, which is, you know, we refer to as the African Amazon. But, you know, when it comes to creating jobs massively, I think that we are still way behind. And I feel very passionately that before we look at digital, which is only a tool, we need to kind of put in place the base conditions, in particular, to encourage manufacturing. Because I think that only manufacturing, producing stuff actually, rather than taking stuff out of the ground and shipping it abroad, will be creating jobs in the numbers that we need in Africa.
Jean, so how do we reindustrialize the continent on the back of these natural and human resources, or assets, if you want to call that, if you call it that?
Yeah, I think that in many ways Africa has been going backwards when it comes to industry, and I can share with you just one personal experience. About 30 years ago, I had the good fortune of visiting some friends in Kano, in the north of Nigeria, which at that time was a thriving center and very reputed center for dyeing and textiles. And I visited the facilities. It was impressive. The products were shipped all over Africa, throughout the Sahara. If you look at it now, it's all gone. It's been replaced by cheap Chinese textiles. And, you know, I could go on and give you other examples. For example, in the DRC, Congo, you know, in 1960 at independence, there were about 6,000 manufacturing entities, factories, workshops, plants that were doing manufacturing of one sort or the other. You know how many there are today? About 100. So that tells us that we have to reindustrialize Africa. And in order to do that, I think that we need to look at each of the industries, not just by the way building cars or appliances, but we have to start with agriculture, which is the biggest industry for Africa. We need to add more value to our products, rather than ship raw materials abroad and then buy back the finished goods at a multiple price. So I think that adding value locally, localization policies are really what is needed. I'll give you an example. Our Francophone, our biggest office is based in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, which is the world's largest producer of cocoa beans. Now, you can ship the cocoa beans abroad, or you can start transforming them into cocoa butter. Maybe you cannot go all the way to producing chocolates, but at least you can do some transformation locally. Now, of course, that requires investments in the order of $5, $10, $15 million. And that's a challenge. But certainly the way of providing jobs to our in Africa is to look more at adding value locally rather than just shipping abroad the raw materials and buying back the finished goods, which is a bit, after all, a colonial way of doing things.
Well, thank you very much for those contributions, John Paul Thiel, Coordinator of Francophone Africa, for those thoughts from Kigali, Rwanda, via Skype. Enjoy your stay there and wish you all the best as the delegates depart today as the 2016 annual event comes to an end. Andrew Nevin is the Chief Economist of PwC Nigeria, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and is live here in the studio with us to discuss the latest report released by the organization this week, titled Africa Business Agenda. Andrew, thanks for having you here. I'm sure you listened to Paul there. Are there some of those issues that flow into this report about the concerns of businesses in Africa?
I mean, absolutely. I think a lot of what Paul said is exactly right. I mean, one of the biggest things that's on the mind of the CEOs that we surveyed is some of the mega trends that are affecting the world and how they affect Africa. So the two biggest ones that came out were urbanization and actually climate change was interesting. Now, urbanization, we're going to have Lagos, 32 million people by 2050. We're going to have Brazzaville, Kinshasa, 35 million people by then. That's the biggest trend that's sort of driving business forward and making it more productive. But as Paul said, unless the young urbanites are getting jobs, then it's not going to work.
So in what areas does African CEOs see growth on the continent despite the headwinds?
Well, I think the point that Paul made about the reindustrialization, I mean, at the end of the day, Africans need to make things for Africans. I mean, that's what's going to drive forward the economy. And a lot of the CEOs that we talked to is very interesting. They do something that you don't see in other economies, which is they want to diversify because they see opportunities, they have skills in one sector, but they can move them to another sector. So you're seeing big conglomerates emerge that are able to operate in Africa, because it's not simple to operate in Africa. So if you've got the skill to be able to operate across the continent in one industry, you transfer that to another industry, and that really is going to be a big driver of growth.
Are those the areas that the PricewaterhouseCoopers see as the new agenda for business on the continent?
Well, I think in terms of industries, if you want to talk about it that way, agriculture, ICT is a big industry that we see going forward. In this country, obviously power is one of the big sectors that need to be formed, but it's the groups that are already good at one sector that are actually doing better and they'll be able to migrate to another sector.
What's the role of the government? What roles do you see, or does PricewaterhouseCoopers see for governments across the various regions on the continent to help in catalyzing growth for business sector?
Well, I think in this report, the CEO sent a very clear message that they aren't satisfied with what the governments are doing, that they need to do more in a few areas. One of them is ease of doing business. So in this country, Nigeria is ranked 169th of ease of doing business. The Buhari regime has come out and said they know they need to improve it, but there needs to be some tangible action to move that forward, because everyone knows the potential of Nigeria, but are you going to invest if it's so hard to do things? One example, for example, people are talking about not the rate of tax, they don't mind paying tax, but just the administration of the tax system and how simple it is to do your taxes, how much time is spent to do your taxes. So that's really on the agenda. Another big thing that they want from the government is more e-government. So talking about this actually digital's arrived here. I mean, Nigeria has the highest rate of internet usage by mobile phone on the planet. Penetration is growing every day. CEOs want to see governments use e-government to make it more efficient, more transparent, clear what's happening. So they're expecting a lot from the government. And then the final issue that really came out in this report, which is of course on everyone's mind right now because of what's happening in London, is the level of corruption. And I think PwC, we put out previously a big report on the economic impact of corruption in Nigeria. The way we're expressing this is dealing with corruption is a necessary, it's not sufficient, it's a necessary but not sufficient condition for moving forward. But the CEOs agreed with that, come out very clearly and say corruption needs to be addressed to move forward.
We thank you for your time today. I remember the last time we spoke was on that, how corruption impact businesses and lives of people in Nigeria. Thank you for being here again today.
Thank you.
Andrew Nevin, the Chief Economist at Pricewaterhouse Nigeria, talking about the latest report, Africa Business Agenda. We'll be back in one.